Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm, and I'll be your host. So today I'm joined with Anders Inset. How you doing today, Anders?
Pretty good. Nice to be with you, Kirk.
Yeah, glad to have you. So for those of you who don't know Anders, tell us a bit about your background before we begin.
Yeah, former hardcore capitalist and athlete. Last 15 years, I've been writing, speaking a lot at conferences, and picked up on some of my investments. Have written, authored 7 books: Quantum Economy, The Viking Code, The Art and Science of Norwegian Success. Some that have an international coverage. The most recent books are titled Ex Machina, The God Experiment, where we, together with a quantum physicist, look at the simulation hypothesis. And the most recent book is The Singularity Paradox, Bridging the Gap Between Humanity and AI. Originally born out of Norway, spent the last 20 plus years in Frankfurt or in Germany. And that's, I think, the interesting part about Anders. 2 daughters
Well, that's the most interesting part, right? Your kids, your kids are,
and a happy wife.
yeah, nice. That's great. Well, you're glad I'm not the only capitalist pig on the show, so thank you for joining us. Um, so let's dive right in. I mean, you have an interesting background. You understand a lot of the topics that just that I find just fascinating. But let's talk about the singularity. You mentioned the singularity paradox. Tell us a bit about that. What is the singularity? I know people have different versions of it, but explain it to listeners who are not familiar with it.
Yeah, but basically, it's a hypothetical future by Ray Kurzweil predicted to be around 2045, where we look at that aspect of singularity. There are, as you said, multiple definitions of that, but it's a pivotal point where the technological growth and expansion goes beyond what we can control in terms of the development of exponential technologies. And what we look at in particularly in this book is that we look at various paradoxes that arises when we now try to build quote unquote a godly like machine externally. So the development of AI as we do today is that we externalize a machine where we try to build not only the knowledgeable part, but also bliss, divinity, and immortality out of the machine. So it's the race towards that super intelligence, AGI, artificial general intelligence, that also people use as a term. That is the same with Singularity that has multiple definitions. This is the term where the AI becomes, better at every human task performed and goes beyond, the collective knowledge of humanity at large. And this is something that might be nearer in future. And in the book, we look at AI and we say that we think it's a very risky task for us humble small human beings to create these type of entities when we do not understand the implications. So what we argue is that we will eventually hack biology and chemistry, and we think it would be better to start off with a human being as a starting point where we develop an artificial human intelligence. So in the book, we introduce AHI. And when I say we, I've written the last 2 books with a quantum physicist friend of mine, and we play with the scientific mathematical foundations and the philosophical. We call it sci-fi with a PHI, science philosophy. And we look at the implications of these type of technologies. And we think that we are in front of the biggest transformation in the understanding of life and what it means to be a mensch, a human being, in the history of mankind, and that is in front of us. And we are looking at, not 100 years, but maybe, 10, 15, 20 years before we tap into these unknown territories. And, maybe I even have to look at what it actually means to be a human being once we start to play around consciousness and things that we have related to as something that human beings only have. So this is short the book. We look at that aspect and we look at various developments that we think are more promising that we could remain quote unquote human in this race towards superintelligence and eventually technological singularity.
So Yeah, so you talked about transformation. I know Ray Kurzweil had talked about the singularity, and I believe I heard him on a podcast where he moved that point earlier, where I forget when it was, but a lot earlier than 45. I could be wrong, but that's what I thought I heard him say. So things are changing rapidly. What when you say transformation, like what happens? Like when this transformational thing happens, like what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think Kurzweil was very early with this term, and he has moved it. But I think he has kind of sort of kept for the singularity part. I think where people out today have moved it forwards is the term around the AGI, the artificial general intelligence, and the the transformational part is basically when these AIs or whatever entities reaches that level that they have self-improving technology. So AI researchers become AIs that self-improve. You will have that explosion of intelligence. To say what that means, how it will impact society, I think that's very, very difficult. I mean, you could look at it from a perspective where we as human beings would develop some kind of new state of consciousness that could be linked to what we today have in a spiritual realm, that we're very technological, where we have different states of awareness and perception. And but I mean, when AI and gets out of hand, I think it's very hard to predict how that will impact how we see society today and humanity as a whole. Um, I think that we will eventually reach a point where it's not so much about is this doable, but it becomes more a question of should we do it. So I think the understanding of the implications is one of the biggest topics that we should spend a lot of time to reflect upon today. Just because we can't technologically do something does not necessarily mean we should. And the other aspect is obviously the security aspect. What definitely I think is already changing today is that we used to error correct. So we pushed the borders of what was doable and achievable. We messed up and we error corrected. It feels like now that it has gotten out of the understanding of engineers and the people running these systems, so that if we look at a super intelligence or a self-improving AI, we kind of sort of just have one shot at getting it right. It seems like it would be very difficult to error correct because of the proportion, the magnitude of the development. So yeah, I think mm, if you look at like more things that we can grasp, these type of developments when it comes to taking on diseases, curing cancer, Alzheimer, looking at medicine, maybe topics to get a complete abundance of energy, to have completely new forms of storage and distribution of energy, which obviously has immense consequences. I think the whole narrative around, exploring other planets, space exploration is a big topic that will come out of this. And yeah, the whole structure and how we operate, our whole ethical founding, our economics, our co-created societies will be influenced by such a potential future.
So you talked about some of the dangers, but I'm curious, what do some of the dangers look like? Like, give us some context here, because I've heard a lot from other technologists, and people are talking about this all the time, but what could that look like? Like, what is the concern that people have?
Yeah, I think the most concern that I see is that this hyper efficiency game, it theoretically you could argue that the efficiency would take away a lot of labor that human beings should not be doing. But here we are looking at market economy where regions and countries and companies fight for profit. So the margin you will have through the efficiency if I'm capable of, providing a service with a 40% margin or even a bottom line to pay my employees out of that efficiency gain, someone else will obviously attack that with a lower profit margin until we have taken out all the inefficiencies, and that would obviously be having a human being, flesh and blood, on the payroll. So I think the transition into a society where there is an abundance of energy, or we have those hyper efficient, large organizations that do not need human labor, the question then becomes, what are we going to do and how do we finance such a system? So I think the unemployment and maybe not, the universal basic income model as a concept today, but I think some kind of basic income and structure and distribution of the wealth is needed in order to stabilize our society. Because what we will see, I believe, is that we will see the rise of the first trillionaires. We will see companies that go way beyond the valuations that we have today. And even that, if you look at it in a retrospect, they have skyrocketed over only the last 5 to 10 years. So these inequalities, well, at the same time, you have the potential to tackle poverty and distribution and have some kind of digitized democratic models and ethical models that could rearrange. It doesn't feel like this is what human beings are particularly good at. So handing over the authority to an AI for a AI democracy, I don't know if that is what we will do. I think still human beings will be in power. So the transition phase to whatever future might come upon us could be very risky when it comes to distribution of resources. And that is something that I worry about a lot. I'm not so worried about that AI going crazy scenario when we have to get Arnold Schwarzenegger or Bruce Willis out of, their retirement state to come save us. That's not. But the hyper efficiency is something that I think is a big, big challenge because as a society we are not equipped to tackle that right now. And those are. So I'm more worried about those societal impacts than these risky maniac robots coming to take us. But yeah, I think it's an existential risk to humanity, while at the same time also unveiling some of the greatest potential to tackle the biggest challenges that we have on this planet, namely, climate, poverty, diseases, etc. So there are huge opportunities, and also I see, great risks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm fascinated with the philosophical perspective around this because there's so much we don't know, and I think the sci-fi writers of our era are probably the best futurists we have. The ideas they come up with are in some ways just brilliant. Um, Not all of them are great. There's the apocalypse scenario, and then there's the other side of the spectrum too, where everything's perfect. But in general, I always find it interesting because the concept of universal basic income when it came up, I think it was panned by just about everybody, including me. Like I'm a capitalist. I just look at that and say that's just communism. That doesn't work. We know it doesn't work because it's been tried many times with no examples of success. But but the same point, I understand where it's coming from, right? If these technologists are seeing a future where labor isn't needed, what's our purpose as human beings, right? Work is a purpose. So I just find it interesting and I find it fascinating that we're alive during this period where we have such rapid transformation. And are we as human beings capable of handling that rapid transformation?
Hmm.
I mean, when I grew up, like nothing ever changed. Like, rock and roll was the change. It wasn't now. I mean, these kids, like when we grew up, you do something stupid and, a week later people forget about it because someone else did something stupid. Now it's permanence. Like you put it in the internet, it's there forever and you can't get away from it, even if it was something, you did as a kid, which kids always do stupid things. So, um, to me, it's interesting to see how, we adapt as human beings to all of this change. Um, and what's the meaning of humanity?
Hmm.
Like, what does that mean for us? Like, I guess the open question I have with the technology is, um, are we going to throttle the growth deliberately, or are we going to just let it happen? Or can we even throttle it?
Hmm.
You know, because a lot of people, I mean, if we throttle it, then China just takes off and does what they want. And so, how do we manage the technological changes that are coming in a way that are responsible, if that's even possible?
Yeah. No, I think that's a very valid question. And if we go back and we look at, the Cold War and nuclear, look at Gorbachev, and the red button could easily have been pushed, right? But we didn't, because we knew that this was an existential threat to humanity. And the first person that cloned a human being, we also figured out that that's maybe not the path to go down. And even China, want to have some kind of stability here. And I think, the person that did that, out of China, he's in jail, in prison. And this is things that seems to be at the threat of an existential risk. We seem to gather the stuff together and to continue this journey, to write the story of mankind. With AI and technology, it's not, it's more subtle. It's not that, because we don't grasp the risk, we don't see it. You could see a nuclear bomb and you can know, we shouldn't do this, right? But with AI, there are so many opportunities, and since we don't understand the implications, it's very hard to see the risk, upon us. And therefore, I think this is a challenge that is, as you said, very much a philosophical topic. And I think you're fully correct. We cannot have, in a winner takes all market, different playing rules, right? So we need to have some kind of global um, governance on some of these technologies. And it goes for biology, biotech, it goes for AI, and it goes for quantum. All of these, are, you cannot regulate in US and Europe, or regulate in China and Europe and US, and everyone that would have that advantage. So the whole open source movement, give it out there and let things, screw up and mess up and come back and error correct. It kind of sort of feels like, and maybe, this is me talking like previous paradigms when people were cautious about development. But if you look at your example on science fiction, I think that's a very good way to look at it. So if you're a sci-fi writer or a producer today, what kind of fiction can you come up with, right? So if you take the season 7 of Black Mirror, and you look at when it came out, it was a sci-fi dystopia technological future, and you fast forward to season 7 now, you almost have the feeling that this could be a scenario that is just months or a couple of years away. So it's that kind of sort of future in the making, and we should say, do we want it more so than fiction? So when mythology and enlightenment, and folklore unites, so everything you can come up with is doable or has been done. What does that mean in relation to being a human being? That's the big question. And that has a lot to do with the topics that you touched upon, giving purpose to life. If you can live forever, if you can reverse even your age, what does that mean? And these are topics that we are now, more or less forced to think about, I believe, because it's so rapid. And if we have this potential future, in 20 years, then now is the only time to figure it out, right?
Yeah, the whole living forever thing I find fascinating. From what I hear, it's very feasible for somebody, I don't know how old you are, but somebody like myself could fall into an era where that actually happens. I find that really interesting, where you could reverse aging. I mean, people are talking about now that they could actually reverse aging for somebody who's like 60 years old. It would just slowly work backwards to when you're 30. That to me is just scary, weird.
Oh,
Like,
but that is the argument. And Brian Johnson, who has become famous and also has his series and all this investment, that I think he, takes his 100 pills a day and invests a lot of money to reverse. And I think they're now down to 4 months reduction per year. And they think they can push the boundaries. And if you figure out how to halt that, there is and I think their arguments are here on both sides, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that there is no argument against reverse. And that's what I said in the beginning when it comes to, hacking biology and chemistry. Once we get it or understand it, having nanobots replacing cells and doing all the shabam within the body, there is, many theoretical developments that could lead in those directions. And if you look at, if someone is blind, you can get your sight back. That's amazing, right? But why stop there when you could see infrared or have supervision, right? Once you figure it out, you can tune it up. You have your downloads app to tune in your various skills and put that in. I mean, if the brain and the operation of our neurochemistry or our dopamine and serotonin, if you can tune that and have a technological approach to this, then obviously there are very little boundaries for superpowers or going beyond what is today possible for a human being. And these scenarios are, not tomorrow, but if you look at, the development in these fields and you map it together, I wouldn't bet against it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of brings in, it sounds a little bit like the Matrix, or you had mentioned earlier the simulation hypothesis. I want to get into some practical applications for listeners, but like, what's your? I'm always curious on this because this hypothesis to me is fascinating. What's your sense on that? Maybe you could explain it to the listeners really quick, and like, what's your
Yeah.
sense on it, and
Well,
is it even provable?
sure. Yeah, that's the right question. So back in 2003, Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed a simulation argument, and he proposed three various options out of one holds to be true. And the argument of the simulation hypothesis goes basically that um, there could be some kind of extinction and event. So humanity is set for an end date. There's an extinction before we simulate base reality. And then there is a scenario that we get bored from progress. We get bored out of creating new devices and improving technology. You could envision sitting in some kind of state of awe, just meditating and just like so. And the third scenario is that progress is possible, and if that is true, then it is not a question of the timeline of whether you could simulate the universe. And I challenged 12 quantum physicists that have various understanding of quantum theory on the topic. Some leaning more toward the Copenhagen interpretation, others with the multi-world interpretation. I said to them, can you prove to me that we are not living in a simulation? And that's how it all started. So my now co-author and I, we published a paper that later got into the book, The Ex Machina, where the only argument that we could come to a conclusion on is that we could simulate every atom in our universe. So simulating one universe with a powerful quantum computer is, at least in theory, doable. But then the challenge becomes that when everyone creates a simulation, so you'd have envision 8 billion people to make their own simulation, and then there is a simulation within the simulation ad infinitum, then eventually, because of the entropy in the universe, the base computer would come to an halt. Uh, if the base computer underlies the same physical laws and there is no external programmer or intervention from a quote unquote God. And that is the argument to say that yes, it's difficult to argue against the simulation, and this is why Neil deGrasse Tyson, David Chalmers, and Elon Musk has been very outspoken about that there is a high likelihood that we do live in a simulation, because you also mentioned that before. Why do we experience all this crazy development? The likelihood of that is so low that it's a much higher potential that we are already part of some simulation chain than we are the ones in base reality simulating the universe. So it is a very interesting thing to play with. Uh, where do I stand on it? Well, no one can take away my subjective experience of talking into a computer with you, and that feels really real. And how the reality or perceived reality is, I know that it is not how I perceive it. And that's why I say it doesn't really matter if you have the goggles in your virtual world, because if the perception is real, then it's just as real as everything else. And that to me is something that one cannot take away. And this is also something that I've written about that I worry about. That's kind of sort of the scenario of the philosophical zombie, where we start to play with the brain and we replicate the brain and we take one neuron, a million neuron, a billion neuron, and eventually the consciousness or the qualia, the experience of your own experience just gets overwritten because it's not within the physics. So we have an identical Kirk and an identical Anders doing the same conversation, but there is no one there to perceive the conversation. And that would be a very boring, cold world because the liveliness of life itself, the experience, that to me is which makes the magic. And this is, at least in theory, also a scenario that could be doable. So you could envision Narcissus, this beautiful methodology figure that stares into the water, and there is a mirror effect of the beauty of the aesthetics of this figure, but there is no one home to perceive this beauty. And that could be the kind of sort of the philosophical zombie state of the future, where you have billions of AIs or merged human beings walking around doing the same thing, but there is no perceived reality. So yeah, I mean, if you look closely, you could always say there are glitches and there are things that are crazy and strange. So it kind of sort of feels like a simulation. So it's a very interesting topic to play with. And once you go down that rabbit hole, it's hard to get back out. So it's, it's something that
I would agree with that. Yeah, I've gone down that rabbit hole. It's really hard to find your way out.
yeah,
So let me ask you this. I mean, this is an investment podcast. So I want to ask, what are the implications? We talked about a lot of we didn't get into the quantum part, but what of all the technology coming, and we've got AI, we've got crypto, we've got quantum, we've got all this stuff that's happening all at the same time. What are the investment implications? Where should people be looking? Where are the greatest opportunities, for investors today? Because some of these things like space, great, but I can't invest in space.
yeah.
So, it's a great idea, but it's not really investable. So, where are the places that have the best opportunity set going forward, and where do you see as the greatest opportunity?
Yeah, I think the monetization of space, even I have a difficulty wrapping my mind around how the business model would be for that in the foreseeable future. But that does not mean that companies can have high valuations, right? But yeah, I think it depends a lot on where you are on your risk factor, and I'm obviously no professional investor in ETFs and real estate and stable, long-term wealth development. That is not my core competences. I'm much more equipped people to talk about that. And I think a lot of these things are already today obviously also algorithmic driven. So the skill of the human being is transferred a lot more to technology than it used to be. When it comes to technologies, I think in health tech there are great opportunities for huge new markets and products and services. I think when it comes to finance and the whole discussion around decentralization, there is not only a technological potentiality, but it is also a risk geopolitically and the structures of the finance system itself. Um, this is not a doomsday prediction, but you could look at the dollar and you could look at the old financial system as something that could be disrupted if the interest of the governing authorities to do so. So this is something that I think that there is at least a great potential for a lot of these financial structures in the decentralized realm, and they might be in the current term beneficial for US companies and players. Therefore, I would say that some of these crypto projects, even though they don't have a lot of substance on the business model side, they do have a future. Can conventional banks and monetary system rapidly transit to a digital world? That is the big question mark. So it's a battle of decentralization versus centralized power applying the same technologies. That's my take on that. So I think, Bitcoin and these things are, Bitcoin is probably almost too big to fail. But then again, then you come into a one technology that I'm very active in the quantum tech space, where, if we have a stable quantum computer, then obviously, all these cryptographies are at great risk. And you can't just like move the Bitcoin to a quantum safe environment, because right now, at least, you would either have to build a fork, which would mean that you have two Bitcoins, and a lot of the wallets that have got lost, or even from the founders and the creators of Bitcoin, they would not transfer unless they would be public, to a new chain. And therefore, the whole idea would be probably then gone, or you would have to shut it off for a very, very long time in order to migrate to a new environment. And that's a technical big hurdle for all of these projects right now. But still, here also, there are companies that one could invest in. And my advice here is to invest in the strong players that are already in the market. I would say when it comes to exponential technologies and high performance computing and quantum, AWS and Amazon is a very stable player that probably will play an important role. The same goes for Microsoft. You could look at NVIDIA, that has heavily invested also in quantum, even though Jensen Huang came out and said quantum is decades away. So these companies will probably acquire or put in the smartest brains, and they also have the wallets to think about these technologies in the longer term than some of the startups. So in particular in quantum, you could look at the hardware part, and you can make some bet on some different ways to build a quantum computer. But I think there I would spread it and I wouldn't like risk a lot. I would, probably invest more in the already existing tech companies that are also heavily going into quantum. If you look at like the middleware or the software part, companies such as Quantinuum that is currently not listed, is an interesting company because the major shareholder is Honeywell, and that could be a fairly cheap buy-in today if they manifest as a big player that emerges out of the development that is very promising in a lot of things that they do. So these type of companies that are invested indirectly into these new tech companies, those could be more risk, more, I mean, with the more stable investments, but also with a good upside. But my investment, I get in very early on startups and tech companies that are not listed, so I'm not very actively trading on the markets. So, but I think the industry that I mentioned, health tech, also in the high performance computing AI, there's still a lot of things to be done there. In quantum, if there is potential for new listings, there might be some interesting. But the tech stocks in quantum in particular are insanely high valued compared to the revenue and the basic criteria that one, as an investor would use. So yeah, but I think in health sector there's a lot of growth, and obviously coming out of these technologies, there might be new gigantic markets that will emerge. One thing that I think could be interesting is obviously humanoid robots. I think the whole essence of and here I had just an anecdote that I challenged the head of sustainability of Lufthansa, Porsche, Adidas, and I talked to them and I said, if you all have a humanoid robot at your home, will it be the same as the one I have? So yeah, most likely not. If they, yeah, what do you mean? So that yeah, we put on clothes. We have an eye for aesthetics. We want to individualize. So will it have a tailor-made suit? Will it have sneakers from Adidas? Will it have a haircut? Whatever. So there is probably a huge consumer market only on the consumer product side around humanoid robots coming, which is also a very interesting thought when you look at sustainability and the use of resources. But most likely, this is what we will do because this is our behavior as a weird species. So yeah, but I think in the whole aspect of the humanoid robot, it's a battle to get the one entity put into our homes and then optimize and update from there with all kinds of subscription models.
Interesting. So if you had to pick a sci-fi movie, which do you think would most closely reflect the future for us?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. I'm obviously, I've had taken a lot out of Star Trek over the years as anecdotes, obviously. When you look at Ex Machina, that was produced by Alex Garland, he has wrapped his mind around a lot of the philosophical challenges. And that, to me, is a great movie, not only because it was partially filmed in Norway, in my home country, but this is a scenario that I think is not necessarily impossible and not too far away. And having these sentient robots or perceived sentient robots, they are things that we should think about. And therefore, I think Ex Machina is a good movie to start to think about the future of humanity from a philosophical lens.
Yeah. So, I'm, when you kind of look at things like AI, let's go back to AI for a minute. Um, I struggle a little bit conceptually because, I see the application when it came out a few years ago. I was at the front end. I was testing it out. I was, trying to figure out what it could do. And, I found some holes pretty quickly, that I've kind of used as a good marker for its progress. And it certainly has advanced a lot, even since it first came out to the public. Um, at, at at the same time, I've seen very few applications that people are currently using it for that are really changing their industry. It seems to me at the moment, and CEOs have kind of said this across the board in surveys, that it's they haven't seen any sort of increased profits. They haven't seen the benefit of AI yet. Um, to me, it seems like it's more like a hobbyist's dream than like a everyday person practical use case. I'm not saying it won't get there, but right now it's not, in my opinion. So, wh what do you think has to happen for AI to all of a sudden change the game where people are really they should be worried about their jobs and their industries?
No, that's a great question. And yeah, I think I mean, you could say we're getting tired of LLMs, right?
Hmm.
This is basically our access to infinite free knowledge. But does it generate profits? No. The first thing we should think about is, can you afford not to implement it? Right. So, does it generate new revenue? Does it save you cost? If everyone is doing it, it's more about if you're not the driver of process optimization on look at a very simple thing like customer support, right? That is getting better and some get it, right? And had you have a competitive advantage because you have less cost, will it save your business? No, but if you stay with the old model, then you will most likely not be competitive. So this is like the most obvious near-term cases. I've taught a lot about this in the past as well. And I've looked at agentic AI and industry AI, as I call it, like industry use cases. And I think these are the ones together with automation of production, where we will, by the end of this year, see really, really strong implementations of optimizations within specialized AI use case scenarios. This could be for research. This could be for various divisions to take away a lot of the quote unquote easy work. I mean, it's even with the LLMs and today, if you look at it from a research standpoint, the quality that gets out of basic analysis, if you look at the consulting industry, right, you can get a lot done by applying these models. But I think here to a question, we need developments, and I think they will come. World models that are linked together, agents that are linked for special purposes that can optimize use cases, supply chain scenarios. I think these are AI cases where the real business impact will come. And I agree with you that LLM is not the cash bringer to that extent. But in the services, at least for small business companies, look at agency services, it has already created a lot of impact. And I think a lot of the people generating content, applying these, journalists doing expert interviews, right? If you're good at prompting, if you take Grok or the recent release of GBT or any of the advanced models, there is a great deal of work that you can get done by using these models. So I wouldn't totally agree that there is no benefit at the moment to that extent that it has economical impact. But I do agree that we need advantages beyond LLMs, and I think they are coming. So I think 2026 will be a much more economically impactful year for AI when it comes to industry AI, when it comes to having world models and having agents that communicate and solve a lot of business related topics.
Nice. Well, Andrews, we have to wrap it up here in the interest of time, but I wanted to final question for you. Based on what we talked about today, any final thoughts you can leave us with and areas we didn't talk about you think people should be thinking about, and then where can we find about more about you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I've just recently written a restructuring of organizations that I call the triangular alchemy of modern business. And I look at how every company today must operate to cope with the speed and the change that we are seeing. And we move away from classical structures where we have hierarchical organizations with sales and technology and finance and HR into what I think will be three pillars that every organization need to be built around. And that is basically one is forge, where you forge or you incubate your clients. You are working to grow your clients as in comparison to selling them products. They come back and buy more. And picture a brewery or a beverage company that help and support bars and restaurants to get into business. This is how many tech companies today operates, give out free services and help their clients grow. I think every company to do that. I think the second part, every company to have an investment branch, operate like a VC. And the third part is the efficiency game. So every organization needs to have an operational excellence unit that is all about efficiency. And these three different pillars that could be seen as three companies within the company, they fight for the same resources and generate a learning or a becoming organization. This is something that I will publish in near future, and it also tackles what I think is the lacking skill amongst leaders today, namely to anticipate the future. And when I say so, I always go out and bet on progress. I think we will have breakthroughs in science with new elements that will help us, create more sufficient batteries, stronger batteries, and have breakthroughs in science and technology that will lead to a new business model. We operate based on reports and studies of the past much more than we anticipate the future. And coming back to Ray Kurzweil, who is in his latest book, argue and also showcase that we have had exponential growth for the past 80 years. And I think the argument is on the other side of the aisle. Why should it stagnate? Why should it stop? So these things are things that I would give to the audience, and I'm going to publish that. And yeah, you can find more about my work. I'm on LinkedIn. But I publish also on my own website on andersinset.com. There you can find articles, books, resources, a lot of things that I work on. And as I mentioned, the new book that just come out is the Singularity Paradox. It's also found under singularityparadox.com or on any conventional bookstore, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, etc.
Awesome. Well, Andrews, I really appreciate you coming to the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Love the conversation. And yeah, I look forward to we'll probably chat in the future because things aren't going to stop changing. So But thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Kirk.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. You mean like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider, or in the room as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room. All right, that was a great interview with Anders. Really appreciate him coming on the show. Now we're into the panel portion of the show where we have our very own Barb Freeberg. Hey, Barb.
Hey Kirk, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing wonderful. It's a beautiful day out and the sun's shining, no clouds. It's awesome. I'm feeling like $1,000,000 today, which I could probably use right about now, but that's all right. That's all right. So, Barb, what were some of your takeaways from the interview?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that.
Yeah,
Frankly, I'm just going to put it out there. I was going to try and hide it, but I didn't know what he was talking about. I never took physics. I'm an investment gal. I'm not a philosopher. Really am not deep into singularity, quantum computing, etc., etc. So Mazel tov to him. I take my hat off to him. He is delving in a realm that I am sure is very interesting. And he's really talking about how technology is going to shape our future and looking at different scenarios. And I can't address that in more simple terms.
yeah, no, I hear you. So let's just kind of carve it out to start. So one of the challenges with technology is most of us don't understand it. And Barb's not alone. Barb, you're not alone. You're with friends here. Misery loves company, as they say. So yeah, I mean, most of us don't understand technology. I don't understand how my phone works. I just know it works, right? I don't understand how AI works. I don't think anybody understands how AI works, frankly. People I've spoke to or listened to, they're like, yeah, we don't know. We're just moving ahead, but we don't really know how it works. Same thing with quantum computing. There's another one. How does that work? The people who came up with it have no idea. They theorized how it works. They think there's parallel dimensions, that there's the quarks or whatever the thing is. They're going in there and they're coming back different. And that's how they think it works. They have no idea. Um, so how does Barb invest when the experts who invented the damn thing don't know how it works?
That is a great question because I am the oldest panelist on this show today. And
She's been here the longest. That's what she meant.
anyhow, when I was born, and I'm not giving you the date, but when I was born, no computers, no cable TV. Heck, we were riding around in horse and buggy. No, 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 that's not true. We did have cars, but you know what the cars look like? Those big, huge, huge things. In my lifetime, I got my first computer in 1988. I currently make my living on the internet. I use AI every single day. I have a gazillion TV channels, most of which I never watch. And so times move on, and everyone is in agreement. Things are changing super rapidly. And I believe, and also we've got algorithms that are totally infiltrating our investment industry. And so I think the challenge for us today is to figure out, take what we've learned about investing in the past and then use it to help us grow our wealth in the future and use it to help us define how we are going to invest in the future. And I do have some ideas about that. So, first of all, I'll let you chime in and then I can tell you my ideas about how to really think about investing for tomorrow in areas that, in a future that is totally unknown, but is moving very rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, look, uh, I think one of the challenges is for most of us is we have jobs, right? So I was actually just talking to my wife a little while before this, and she's like, she works commercial real estate, and she was telling me, she's like, yeah, we have some clients asking about quantum computing and how it's going to impact the real estate, and I was like, it's not. like they it's not even out yet. Like it's not even there. Well, I mean, people are asking, and obviously they need an answer. So the question is, how does it impact things? I don't know. How does AI impact things? How are we just finding out 6 months ago that, oh, by the way, we need more energy? What kind of brainiacs came up with a technology that's going to suck up all the energy in the world and we have no solution for it? Huh. I guess they're not that smart. I mean, I'm not doing this, but that seems to be kind of like one of those things you kind of figure out. Like, what are the risks? What are the limitations? What do we got to plan for? Apparently, nobody did that. So now we're trying to put nuclear plants back online. We have to build them, which will take 20 years. We're going to have an energy problem. So all of you are worried about the global warming problem. It's just going to get worse. So let's be honest. All you greeniacs who wanted to save the planet by getting rid of carbon, you should have been on the nuclear bandwagon years ago, and we wouldn't have had this problem. Where were you? Where were you? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you're hugging a tree, but you should have been at a nuclear plant picketing for them to open it, because that's our problem right now. It is our cleanest energy source that we've mothballed for 50 years because everyone's afraid of a meltdown. And the technology is well past that. And yet we're still worried, which I understand. I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up where we were hiding under our desks because the Russians were going to bomb us with a nuclear weapon, and our desks were going to protect us from that nuclear weapon. So I grew up in that era. I know what it was about. But the point is everybody has failed the future seeing competition. Everyone's missed the ball. So what are the implications for quantum computing? I have no effing idea. Quantum computing, if you don't understand how it works, yeah, I'm just gonna put my tinfoil hat on for a minute here, since it's just me and Barb. She'll forgive me for putting this on. I was listening to a podcast, and I have a sci-fi bent on me. I enjoy sci-fi because, in many ways, sci-fi predicts the future. The best sci-fi writers have predicted the future. Well prior to that, and maybe it's coincidental, but it's interesting, right? That we can think it and we make it happen, right? So I was listening to a podcast which has some, let's say, out there kind of theories, so I'm not going to get into it. But let's say it got me thinking. And I'm thinking, well, we've came up with this radical technology in the last few years. We came up with it after the 50s, and we've had the microchip, and we've had fiber optics. We've had all this crazy stuff that I don't know whoever came up with that. But we've got all this radical technology that's come out. It's seemingly come out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from, but it came from somewhere. And if you come up with AI. You don't know how it works. How did they do that? The people who came up with it don't know how it works. How did that happen? What about quantum computing? They came up with this technology. They don't know how it works. What the F is going on? Like, are we in fantasy land where you just dream it and it happens? I don't know. But when you think about, and I'm clearly not describing what I'm thinking in my mind because you're definitely going to think I'm crazy. But if I think about all these rapid accelerations of technology, it almost seems like it came out of nowhere. Like it just fell from the sky. And so if you think about all this technology, we don't know the implications because we don't even know how it works. So you've got a lot of industries that are going to depend on things like energy use, and we don't have great energy in this world right now. We've got plenty of it, but people hate it. And we don't have a better solution because the people who hate it also hate the better solution. They just hate everything. I think they hate people. But if you really drill down, what do we need? We need more energy. We need cheap energy. We need clean energy. We need that. We don't have enough of it. We've done a really bad job at doing that. We've done a great job at enriching the solar companies and the wind companies, neither of which are good power sources, but we've done nothing to actually solve the problem. So that's a big problem. Energy is our biggest problem right now, and it's going to get exponentially worse. Or we run out of energy, we have brownouts, and we can't accelerate technology. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we shouldn't accelerate that quickly. But at the end of the day, we do need cheap, clean, abundant energy. Everyone is better off with that, and we don't. And I'm thinking that should be where we should be putting our efforts into that technology. I've seen a bunch of videos, a bunch of cool stuff online. Don't know if it's true. Maybe it's BS, but seemingly there should be a solution out there, which we need to figure out really quick. Now, if you think about what are the things that we need to focus on, energy, data centers, where's all this stuff getting housed? Data centers. Data centers are rocking right now. Everyone's trying to get more data centers. I think it was Microsoft paid double the ongoing price for energy for like a certain amount of energy from a nuclear plant. They paid double what the current price is. Is the current price correct? Absolutely not. Not if somebody's willing to pay double. And those of you who haven't followed the uranium market know all about this. If you haven't, look into it. It's crazy. It's crazy town. It is a weird market that there's really there's like a contract market and then there's a spot market and they're different. And it's kind of like, I'll give you an example. Like during COVID, the world shut down. You could not find enough gold coins. They were out of gold coins everywhere. Like if you went and talked to a dealer, they were out. Yet the gold price went down. I don't know about you, Barb, but I have a degree in economics, and I'm not proud of it right now because economics doesn't work. Supply and demand is what drives price, and yet it didn't during that time. There's no supply, a lot of demand, price went down. That's not how it works. So thinking about all these implications, what matters is understanding where the trends are directionally going, understanding what's needed to get there, and trying to get on the bandwagon. Uranium is a no-brainer, in my opinion. We have a nuclear supportive president. We have a nuclear supportive I don't know what you call it, lobbying group. All the tech companies are now in favor of nuclear, so now nuclear is going forward. Shocker right there. So if you think about like who's pushing the needle, it's the powers that be and the money is pushing the needle towards nuclear. So nuclear is a good direction. So those are the things we should be thinking about. Where directionally are we going? What if we have a recession in the next few months? I don't know. People are still going to need more energy. So if it goes down, buy more. Like it's a positive trend. Are people going to buy more cigarettes? I don't know, but they're certainly going to buy more uranium. So things to think about, right? Think about all these implications, how it's hard to understand the technology, but you don't have to be a wizard at the technology. You just have to be a wizard at understanding what drives it. And that's picks and shovels, right? You don't have to know where to mine for gold. Just know where to go to buy a pick and shovel. and that's all you need to do. Open up a store, pick some shovels, and there you go. You can make money. So think about it that way. I think it's a better path to success than trying to pick the next gen technology because all of us are bad at that. I think that's just the truth. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Barb? That's kind of my rant. I got to take off this thing. I'm melting my brain right here.
Love the hat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got a bachelor's in economics, a master's in finance, and I don't know where the market's going. I don't know what technologies are going to succeed and which ones are going to die. If you look back at the construction of the S&P 500 or the Dow, how many original companies are left in those indices from when they were first started? Not a lot. And so the key is, first of all, if you're really working in an industry that you know has a lot of growth potential, then use that knowledge to invest in that industry. But if you're like the rest of us and your head is spinning over all of the rapid changes and you don't know what to do, I can give you a little advice based on my 40 years of investing. And you know, it's been an up and down ride, but over time, investments in companies that are growing and changing have delivered very good long-term returns. So, first of all, I'm going to put something out there which is just bothers me so much because I think a lot of people either don't know about it, they don't think about it. In fundamental investing, which means looking at the growth of a company, how fast their revenues are growing, how fast are their earnings growing, and then looking at the price that you will pay for that stock. That's called the PE ratio. When the price you pay is super high in relation to the level of earnings, then many of us think you're paying a premium for that company. Now, the company could surprise and grow exponentially faster, causing the denominator, the earnings, to speed up, and all of a sudden you haven't overpaid. But in most cases, if you look at the trends of a simple price earnings ratio or a Shiller PE, which takes the average of the last 10 years data and averages it out, we are in times now of high valuations that are approaching those of the highest in my lifetime, which was at the end of 2000. And typically what happens, and many people are predicting this will happen going further, is that current stock market returns are going to be a lot lower, at least in the next decade, because in general, assets don't trade in an overvalued range forever. Something happens and we don't know what it might be, a recession or some external factors. We didn't know about the mortgage meltdown, or, maybe we didn't predict the dot-com bubble bursting in the end of the 1990s. And something's going to happen that's going to really drop prices on assets. And my personal belief is when that does happen, it will be a really good time. First of all, don't sell your assets when they lose money. That's the wrong strategy. But it is an ideal time to really go in on a lot of these new sectors that have the potential to really explode. And I like sector ETFs because they put together a bunch of similar type companies. So you're not betting on Pfizer or Moderna or, Eli Lilly, but you're buying, say, a medical or pharmaceutical sector ETF, or you're buying an AI ETF, or you're buying a blockchain ETF, or you're buying a new technologies ETF. Many companies are putting these out and they're just saying, I think these are the new technologies. I'm going to invest in public companies in those areas and see how they do. And in general, even if all of them don't outperform, if the manager of that exchange traded fund or mutual fund has a half decent track record, well, then they might hit on some winners and you might outperform. So that is my strategy. Look at some of these broader themes. I totally agree with Kirk on the data center storage realm. You can get those into ETFs, exchange traded REIT funds, REIT, real estate investment trust funds. I also know a lot of us, the baby boomers, we're getting really old and we are going into senior living facilities. Now, that's not really glamorous, but there I expect that trend is going to increase demand for those type of facilities. So I'm saying if you want to get in on these technology trends, look at exchange traded funds, sector exchange traded funds in the new technologies, blockchain, crypto, advanced computing. There's so many out there. Dip your toes in now and then wait. Look, a market crash is going to come sometime. They happen periodically every few years. Go in big during those times, and you will set yourself up for some decent forward-looking returns. Also, this is not about the technology thing. International stocks are valued much cheaper today than US stocks. And those of you who are shunning international markets should consider many smart analysts are loading up on international stock funds. You should give them a look as well. Again, this is not advice, this is just ideas and education. Go to your own financial advisor to get your real financial advice.
Yeah, I agree with that last part. Except for the international, though. I don't know. I think that discount is deserved. I've been hearing for 10 years that the experts are saying you should invest in international, and I've noticed it too. There's some great opportunities, but there's a reason that no one's investing in there. I think what's interesting to me, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying the way it is, because that's the way that's everything's priced, right? It's the price is the ultimate arbiter, not Barbara me. What I find interesting is Europe's been discounted for a long time, but people consider Europe like like a museum, you know, where it's just nothing ever changes, it's overregulated. There's no growth whatsoever. And so, there's a reason why it's not growing. Japan, there's reasons why it's not growing, even though I think there's some really cheap companies in Japan. So, despite the fact the US is really expensive and despite the fact that our economy is questionable, it, it's still the cleanest, dirtiest shirt. I think that's the problem is that if you, I've heard people talk about this and I wasn't thinking about it and it just opened my mind. I'm like, yeah, you're right. There's no better place to invest. That's the problem. That's why people have been investing in the US for like 10 years, like 15 years, like US only, growth only, not international, not value. It's like this is where the growth is. People are investing in growth, and if you spread out the performance in the S&P, you find it's very narrow. So I think, the challenge that we all have is how do you find the growth? How do you invest in the future? It's a challenge for all of us. And how do you invest when everything's really expensive? It's a challenge, right? It just because it's expensive doesn't mean it can't get more expensive. I mean, you see all the things going on, and it almost seems like the market does the exact opposite of what do you think's going to happen. So Trump got elected. Oh yeah, everything's going to be great. Okay. We got tariffs. Oh, it's going to be terrible. We're going to have a recession and everyone's going to lose money. It's going to be hyperinflation. None of that happened. Like, yeah, the markets are up a little bit. Okay. Tariffs have not turned the world inside out.
I
You know,
don't
they,
get that though, Kirk. I mean, I am committed to thinking that tariffs should slam the market
Right.
because it's causing pricing. It is and will cause pricing on those items with tariffs to go up, and it will cause inflation. And economically, higher prices reduce demand, right? So, wouldn't you think that the tariffs would hurt the market?
Stop waving your economics degree around, Barb. It's useless. I know I got one too. It's here's the thing. We've all been told that tariffs are bad. Everyone in the media told us tariffs are bad. Pretty much
Well,
everyone
not
everywhere.
Donald Trump. He loves
I
tariffs as
I
his
didn't say Trump. I
advisors.
said the
So,
media, right? And subsequently, anyone of note of academic note says tariffs are bad. And you know, the problem with economics is it's all a guess. It's all of it's a guess. Most of economics is let's see what happened and let's wrap a theory around it after the fact to explain what happened for something that we didn't understand before. And it doesn't mean it's right. I mean, I have the degree as well. I just don't BS. But here's the problem.
now
Um,
who's showing off?
well, I'm not bragging where I got it, Barb. I'm just saying I have one. I'm not bragging. This is probably the first time people know I have an economics degree because I do not brag about it. Um, anyway, my point is this. Um, if you think about a theory, tariffs are bad, that's based on a historical event, right? There was a historical event, Smoot-Hawley, right? People freaked out. It was really bad. There are other there are other factors involved. Also, I actually read a great email article by John Malden, who's great with economics. I love his stuff. And he actually laid this out as to theory as to why it's not becoming a problem. Well, first of all, it's not a problem because we're not in a trade war. They call it a trade war on TV, but it's not a trade war. There are negotiations over tariffs, right? Over what that equalization should be. That's part of it, right? Is we're not in a trade war. Whereas before it was like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Like when Trump and China were arguing over tariffs, and where it's the 200% tariff. Like that's just negotiation, right? They're not going to actually do that. That would be stupid for both countries. So the reality is everyone's smart enough to know that we got to come to the table and figure this out, right? The world is too small of a place. We need to figure it out. So what it is a realignment of trade. Okay. A realignment is the same thing that happens when we change the tax code. It's a realignment of money flows. So we reduce income taxes. That has implications. Let's say we say, oh, you get a deduction for your real estate. That has implications. Let's say we have tax credits for new technology or R&D. We have all those things. That causes money to go from point A to point B. It's a realignment of the tax code. So what they're doing with tariffs is it's a realignment of global trade. It's not a trade war, right? And you could argue that whether you like what Trump's doing or not, it's kind of irrelevant what you think. But the reality is what is actually happening. None of us really know the implications, right? We're theorizing what's going to happen. So far, it hasn't been bad. But we all know that Trump is a negotiator. He wants to negotiate a deal. So he'll negotiate some deal. He did with Europe. He did with Japan. He did with the UK. He's doing it with other countries. And eventually he'll have all these things realigned where it's better. And that should lead to more money in our government coffers, which just means government politicians spend more money stupidly. But regardless, it's directionally a good thing. Now, Barb's point is valid, which is, okay, so individuals and companies are going to have to pay more. Yeah, they are. And here's what else is going to be a shocker. Companies have large profit margins. Some companies have said, all right, we're going to eat this. Yeah, because you've screwed us so badly with the profit margins that, yeah, you can afford to take a little bit of a hit, which of course you'll raise over time. You'll look good now, but of course you'll raise it. I mean, the reality is that these companies are making obnoxious amounts of money, and I'm not knocking it. It's just when you have oligopolies or monopolies, you can charge whatever you want for a price, and inevitably that means you're going to have a big margin. When you have an efficient economy, which we do not, that means the profit should be close to zero, and you have just enough to make it worthwhile to make a widget. So there's a lot of profit baked in. The small and mid-sized companies are struggling with this. I'll say that. Barb is correct. Small and mid-sized companies are struggling, and they're going to continue to struggle for a lot of reasons, not just this. And individuals will pay more. But you know what? We had 100% inflation during COVID, and it's only showing up as what, 37% from then till now? It's over 100. I don't know where those people are shopping, but it's not where I shop. It's over 100% inflation. So the fact that we have to pay a little bit more, at this point, whatever. You just got to make more money. The big problem isn't inflation. The big problem is wages. That's been the problem for the last, up until COVID, for 20 years. That wage inflation was flat. It went up and down a little bit. It was basically flat for 20 years. And I don't know where it is in the last few years, so I'm just excluding that. I'm not excluding it for a reason other than the fact that I don't have it in front of me. But pretty much it's been mostly flat in comparison to inflation. So wages should outpace inflation if you want to have a chance. Now, if inflation is correct and wages are flat in comparison, the CPI adjusted wages are flat, then everything should be fine because you can make the same amount of money for the same amount of goods. But that's not what's happening. Goods are going up a lot. That's not reflected in the CPI, and the wages are flat. So the wages are basically keeping up with inflation. So you have this discrepancy. That happened before Trump. That has nothing to do with Trump. Will it make it worse? Maybe. I don't know. I hear the arguments everybody makes, and they sound logical, but it's not happening. Here's another argument I hear that sounds logical, and it's not happening. Printing money equals inflation. Think about this. I actually just listened to a good podcast. It was a debate between two people, and it was a very lively debate. And I'm probably going to have one of the guests on the show because it was I liked the way he was arguing. I didn't agree 100%, but I liked the way he was thinking. Here's the thing: printing money, by a textbook definition of my economics textbook, says printing money equals inflation. But that's not really how it works. It's printing money times the velocity of money really is what equals the money supply and all that other stuff. So is printing money leading to inflation? Why did we have, in my opinion, deflation for like a 15-year period, like 2005 to like 2000, right before 2020, right before COVID? We had 0% interest rates. Why? Because we had no inflation. I know what the CPI said, but I did some back of the napkin calculations on goods, and some years it was actually deflationary. They didn't say that, but it was negative. So we had very low inflation, but they were printing the crap out of money. It was QE every 6 months. Why didn't we have massive inflation? My textbook says it should happen, but it didn't. Why? That's a logical approach. Yeah, we had inflation. Everyone said we had inflation. Where was it? I didn't see it. I didn't see it at all. So what happened? That's a different episode. But my point is, there are things that make sense logically that don't actually happen in real life. That was one of them. Everyone knew that we had inflation because we're printing money, but it's not what happened. I talked to these really, really smart people who continue to say, well, you can keep printing money all you want. It'll lead to hyperinflation. Maybe. It hasn't happened. Where is it? I don't know. So my point is that some logic doesn't always play in, and this might be another case of that. That's why when Trump got elected and he said all these things and people were freaking out, oh my God, we're going to have hyperinflation. I was like, let's wait and see. I don't know. I'm open to, my gut reaction is yes, it causes inflation. But I also said I'm open to consideration that I'm wrong, because what he's saying has not been said by anybody else. So it's not coming out of thin air. He didn't just pull it out of thin air and say, oh, we're just going to throw tariffs around. I know people talk about him like he's a buffoon, but he's really not. The guy who gets elected twice, who has no political career and everyone's against him, he's not a dummy. Okay. Like, you might not like him, but he's not a dummy. So he has this theory that tariffs are a good thing. Okay. I'm listening. I haven't heard a good argument for why they are, but I'm open to listening. He was on Joe Rogan and I thought his argument was poor, but give me a good argument, I'll listen to it. I just haven't heard one. So it comes down to our economic system, our financial system is highly complicated. It's not simple. We try to make things simple in life. We always do. We take complex systems and we're like, oh, it's simple. Like, oh, we have global warming. Oh, let's just stop, pulling carbon out of the ground. Oh yeah, that's the problem. It could be 50 million things. We don't know, right? But we try to simplify things into one answer. Oh, it has to be this, right? Or tariffs are bad. I don't know. I'll give you another one for my example. Printing money equals inflation. Didn't happen. Well, maybe it did, and maybe we had deflation and it was offsetting the deflation. That's possible. Or maybe it's you gave a bunch of money to the bank and not people. So we didn't have inflation because they didn't spend it. Banks didn't spend it. They just stuck it in a bank vault and it just recirculated. So it didn't cause inflation. There's a whole bunch of things it could be, but we'll never know because we don't have an alternative timeline where we compared the two. Otherwise, it's not possible to know. So we're all theorizing. So Barb could be right. I don't know. But I think it's important to consider the fact that, and this brings up a mental model that we've talked about time and time again, is being open to the fact that you don't know the answer, right? Being open to the fact you could be wrong. I do it all the time. I make all these statements on the show and like I know the answer, but I'm also open to the fact that I'm wrong. I talk about it on the show. I'm wrong. I made a mistake. Yeah, real estate. I thought it was based on the yield. Apparently not, because real estate hasn't come down and yields are up. So I don't know. I was wrong. It could be something else. Maybe it's supply and demand. I don't know. Anyway, so I just want to kind of like carve that out because I think it's important that we all recognize that we all try to find a simple answer to things, and it's usually more complicated than that. Um, anyway, so what are your favorite trends, Barb? And I'll context this while you're thinking about it. I asked AI. AI is obviously a trend. I asked AI, what are the top trends? The top trends are agentic AI, AI governance and security. Seeing a pattern here, maybe a little bias. The next one's quantum computing, energy efficient computing, hybrid computing, and spatial computing. Well, I don't know what that last one is, or even energy efficient computing. I guess I get it. Why are computers? What about the other trends? This is what it came up with.
What was the prompt you gave to get that list?
What are the big trends in technology and what are investing implications? I mean, there's more trends in technology. I guess maybe you
Yeah,
carve it
I
out.
think that's like super narrow.
Yeah,
I think that
it's a
is
little too narrow.
super, super narrow. And I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of the trends. I think medical is a huge trend. I think aging population's a huge trend. Blockchain is tremendous. AI, quantum computing, which I don't know what it is or how to monetize it, but
None
people
right
seem to be
now.
talking about it. But I think the key is you want to educate yourself because one of the best ways, I used to be a stock picker. Now I pretty much invest in funds, but and today I think with the algorithmic trading, it's even harder to be a stock picker than it was back 20, 30 years ago. But you do want to understand not what the biggest influencers are saying online, but the scientists, the professors, the educated, people who are working in the computer industry and the technology industry. You want to get a variety of viewpoints. Don't stick to the right, don't stick to the left. Look at everything. And I think it's important also to understand like governmental policies. I mean, the tax code's going to have a huge impact on all of us, as is the rising deficit. We didn't talk about that. That's for another podcast, but that is going to impact us as well. So I think, be careful with what you're reading and also look at some of the big thought leaders and see what they're saying, and then look at them with a critical eye.
So, actually, some other trends that I asked a question again. What are all top 10 all trends? And it still went back to technology, so it apparently didn't understand my inference. But it did expand when I put 10.
Well,
Um,
and that just
in
gets to one of the really important things with AI is you really have to look even at your AI responses with a critical eye. I was writing an investment brokerage review this morning, and I asked it some questions about the platform. I asked it only to use certain URLs. And then when they gave me the information, I went to the URL and their response was not listed there. And so I said, give me the specific URL where you got this information. And the AI response was, call customer service.
Oh, wow.
So I knew I don't know where they got it, but it was wrong. So again, put your critical thinking hat on with all information that you are given.
It's like a recent college graduate, you know, and they're you're like, go do this thing, and it's like, oh, here it is, and like, where'd you get that? Oh, I did the research myself. Like, show me. I was like, well, I lost it. My dog ate it. You know, like you're just trying to, like you're trying to skirt by. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I mean, in many ways, AI is like human beings, and we don't think of it that way, but it does really,
A
it
lot of
did,
mistakes. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not saying I don't like it or use it, but I always go back to the original citations to make sure that what they're telling me is accurate because I don't want to, first of all, base my professional writing on something that is inaccurate or just base my judgment, my decision making on information that's not correct.
yeah. No, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's, I think when you're thinking about using AI, you have to use it for certain tools. You have to know the limitations, right? You don't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb. Like you need to know what you're using it for and what it like. Here's an example. I actually just taught a bunch of people today on using AI, and I think I mentioned this in the past. We're going to do an AI workshop in the fall, so I don't know when this episode comes out, but if you're interested in, if you're a business owner and want to take it, let me know because we're taking reservations for seats right now. But basically, if you think about like AI, um, it's not good at math. It's not good at math. Don't ask it to do math. And you think, well, it's a computer. It should be good at math. No, an AI is like a person. A, because people are bad at math, but also because it's not a computer. A computer's perfect with math. AI is not. AI is a person. It's imperfect.
You
And
know,
so it makes, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually had a financial calculation I wanted to do, and I asked it how to do it and couldn't do it. I said, okay, I have a fancy business calculator. I said, tell me the steps to take on my, you know, TI, BA, whatever calculator. Tell me the steps to take to complete this calculation. So they gave me a general enough idea so I could go through and do the calculation myself. But yeah, for sure, don't give it a math problem.
Yeah, I had to help my son. He was doing a final exam and he was trying to, it was a concept he didn't know. So I was like, oh, we'll just take a picture of it and put it in AI, see what it comes back with. I was like, this is crap. So it's not good at math. It's not good at emotion. It's not good at jokes. Which if you want to know if AI is sentient, have it tell you a joke, not a reiteration from what it finds on the internet, but have it create an original joke. And the way you know is you just keep asking it. Like, tell me another joke. Tell me another joke. Like I did this 2 years ago, and after like three or four, it started regurgitating stuff and started coming up with stupid stuff. Like it was bad. Um, but have it tell a joke and explain it, and that's where you know it's sentient because it understands people. Um, it's not. It's good. It's not good with stories. It'll actually make up stories. Like if you have it do some marketing thing, it'll make up a story. It's not real. Well, that's not helpful because you don't want fake stories in your marketing. Um, you could teach it on how to construct things with stories and whatever. But my point is when you're thinking about applications of things, you need to know its limitations. But without going down the road of too much of AI, because I don't want to turn this into an AI episode. Um, some of the other things that I asked it that it came up with, we're talking about it said disinformation security. I would call it information security, which aligns well with cryptography. So one of the things it says post-quantum cryptography. That's interesting. A lot of people are actually worried about that. They're worried about quantum computing will crack every single security system in the world. Yeah, true, but won't they come up with quantum computing that will defend it? Like to me, it just seems like the radar detector policeman problem, where where you just come up with better technology. So I don't know if I buy that yet, but we'll see. And the last one was robotics. We didn't mention robotics, which seems to be one of the biggest technology trends around. I will tell you that I was looking at a video, and it was a company, a Chinese company, that had a robot that looked like a Power Ranger and was doing all this acrobatic stuff. And then out of nowhere, it just started like throwing haymakers. Like it was just doing backbends and doing cartwheels. And then it turns to you and just starts like throwing haymakers. And I'm like, what the hell? I was like, like imagine taking this home and like do a cartwheel and it starts like throwing punches. Like it was weird. I have to say, like, this was literally the only video on the front page it was showing. And I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to do like robot boxing. Like it just seemed a bit weird. But the point being is like if that's real, holy crap. Like robots, AI is going to change the world before robots, but robots are next. So all the blue collar jobs that are going to be safe for AI, they won't be safe for robots. That's going to be a weird world. It's going to be a very weird place. But imagine of all the cool things that can be done. And the one thing it didn't say was battery technology. That's actually one of the biggest problems. Data storage, cheap and clean energy, and battery. We don't have good battery solutions. You need to be able to store energy. If you can get it all from the sun, what do you do when the sun goes down, right? You need good battery storage. So all those are really, frankly, good technological trends, some of which have been discussed, some have not, on the interview. But I think we all need to be thinking about these things, and just because there's a technology trend doesn't mean you should invest in it. Like space is a great trend. How do you invest in it? I don't know. Not a lot of great places to invest. The space ETF is a bunch of companies that don't invest in space. So I don't know. Investing in cannabis, all these things, like where you're investing. Investing in Cuba, the Cuba ETF. There's no Cuban companies. So I think, if there's interest, people will create an ETF, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're investing in the thing. So we'll wrap it up here in the interest of time. Barb, final thoughts, and where can people find more about you?
Well, you can find me at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance and also on YouTube. And just keep reading, keep learning. Don't go all in on one thing unless you're willing to lose everything. Keep in mind diversification.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Barb. Great advice. And that means do not put all your money in Bitcoin. Just saying this again. Do not put all your money in Bitcoin. I don't care how good it is. Anyway, or any of these high flyers. I know someone wants to do that, but that's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us in Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, wealth manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.